Hey everybody, it's me, John. Welcome to another edition of JohnnyVlogs. That's right, the big Q&A episode to celebrate passing 15,000 subscribers. Before we get started, I have to thank all the new Patreon supporters, and there are a lot of you this week, so let's get to it and let's get through it. First of all, Elizabeth New, thank you so much, Elizabeth. John Ridgway, Margaret Werderitz, I hope I'm saying that right, Margaret. Eugenio Fitzpatrick, I believe it's Eugenio, M or Emmy, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, I think it's just M. Hey M, thank you. And I think we have some questions from you coming up, if not in this episode, on the Patreon special episode of the Q&A. Lance, thank you so much, Lance. Alucia Seeps, I don't know. Alucia Sipes, thank you so much for your contribution. And Patrick Duffy, I think I got that one right. Thank you so much to all of my new Patreon supporters here. You guys are amazing. And I really appreciate that I'm able to donate more often on some of these missing person cases, which is really cool. And I couldn't do without you guys. So thank you to my Patreon supporters. So now let's get to the Q&A. And remember, this is basically, I'm going to go through the top 5 questions that came in for the Q&A for this version of it. However, if you're a Patreon supporter, you're going to get an additional link, which is going to have a lot more questions, at least 10 more questions, probably a little more than that. I'm going to try to get through every question that you guys send in, unless it's a redundant question. And I'm not going to go over the questions here in this episode again on the Patreon one. So even if you are a Patreon supporter, know that there's different answers and different questions here in this episode. So stick around. All right, let's get to it. First off, from Hannah Alori. How is covering missing people affecting your emotional state? Geez, I hope I worded that correctly. You worded it correctly, Hannah. And this question kind of comes my way quite a bit, and I have spoken about it just a little bit in the comments, but I don't talk about it too much in front of camera. It certainly does affect my emotional state in a few different ways. First of all, of course, there's the weight of looking into that type of story and doing the research around that story and trying to understand it. And that means looking into a side of humanity that isn't easy for a lot of people to spend a lot of time looking in that direction. But that's kind of how I feel my place in all of this works. Even when I was working in my IT jobs in the entertainment industry, I would frequently be the person to sit with the problems and try to figure out a solution. And I got pretty used to putting myself in these, what some people would consider uncomfortable situations, where I'm looking through all this research and looking through a bunch of different information that a lot of other people might not want to spend time with. So I've kind of built myself up to that. There is a balance to it. I do have to be sure to keep that locked in to kind of a finite period of time. And I have to watch, sometimes these stories kind of drag you into them. And I'm thankful that the first case I looked into, that wasn't really a missing person case, but the first big brain scratch case was the Elisa Lam case. And I learned so much into looking into that case, and about how people get pulled into the story, and then even come up with all these different kind of strange theories about what could have happened. It was a really good learning experience for me, and I think it helped me develop the skill set to look into the missing persons cases in a way where I'm not distancing myself from the material, but I do know how to handle it in doses. I know when I need a break from it. I know that I can only look into a case for a certain number of hours before it really starts to weigh on me. Another way that this all works out is occasionally I will be in contact with family members of the missing people. And that has been, it's a little nerve-wracking when contact is first becoming initiated, because you never know what you're going to hear. These are people that are hurt, they're sensitive, and they could easily, lash out at me for saying, hey, why are you covering this? Why are you talking about this? My family doesn't want to hear about this stuff anymore. I mean, you can never really anticipate the types of reactions you're going to get from these people, but for me, each of those experiences has turned out to be actually kind of amazing. And I've gotten to talk to some people that are very strong and inspiring in a bit of a unique way. And luckily, the feedback that I've gotten from those people more often than not is they're happy for the help. They're happy for additional exposure to be raised around the case. In many cases, I hear that the research I do is pretty good or quite good. In a few cases, they've had some corrections, but that stuff really doesn't bother me too much. And that's part of what is great about YouTube. And it's something that some viewers don't really have a good grasp of. They come to YouTube and they feel like they're watching a television show, and if you don't give them all the answers they're looking for, or if you say something that's incorrect, then they think they could just write off the whole thing. You don't know what you're talking about, and they'll even drop a comment, you're wrong about this, blah, blah, blah. Well, YouTube is a communications platform. It's a two-way dialogue. No one ever has to just end it with, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about, blah. They could, if they care enough and take the time, enlighten the rest of us with whatever that incorrect fact is. Spend the extra time to write that comment out and say, hey, in your video you said this. I understand you're one guy doing most of this research, or you have a handful of researchers helping you, and you guys are a real small team. I know a bit more about this case because I looked into it for years. Here is what I found out about it. And then share it with the rest of us. And in most cases, the Brain Scratch audience, all of you out there, are very good about knowing that this is a dialogue. It is a two-way communication. But occasionally, particularly for new people that come into the fold, sometimes they feel like, hey, this is a TV show, this guy's wrong, and I just got to tell him he's wrong. Yeah, that's partially helpful, but what would be a lot more helpful is saying how I'm wrong, what the information is to correct that, maybe adding some links for further research that we can do that verifies your point of view or information. So to answer your question succinctly, does it affect my emotional state? Certainly. Right from the start, in terms of the research process, through making the video, which if you guys watched Case Cracked this week, I did not expect to get emotional when I was talking about the tributes that were happening for Jacob, all the way through the aftermath of the videos being released, which is communicating with all of you and trying to learn more things from you guys about my point of view and what I understand about this. I do see it as an open dialogue. I do see it as I'm malleable over here. I am waiting for better information and more feedback, and in some cases I will change my opinion because of that. So it's really a wonderful thing when people realize that and kind of all work together. Olivia Williams asks, was there a single big event that triggered you to start this series? Was it a particular case or something in your local area maybe? Thank you for all your hard work. I think I touched on it a little bit in the last episode. It was certainly the Elisa Lam case. And the thing that really triggered me on that case was seeing all the other videos out there that were kind of turning that into a spooky story, like something you'd tell your kids before they go to bed at night to try to scare them, or some kind of Halloween story. There's so much YouTube content out there that is taking these so-called true stories and then trying to turn them into what feels like a fictionalized scare story or a scary story of some kind. And with Elisa's case in particular, there are so many different theories that came up because of that propensity. The truth of her case is this one little bubble, very few actual facts that we know, but the folklore that broke off of that and went splintering across the internet is almost endless. So what really motivated me was watching a bunch of those videos and then saying, you know what, I want to understand this better. And at first, when I came into it, I was thinking along those lines of folklore. There was just so much information out there, I didn't know how to weed back to the actual facts of the case. And that's why in my first video, I'm wondering if she is even a real person or if this is some kind of psyop of some kind or something like that. Luckily, through that mechanic that I talked about with all of you guys, getting feedback, getting further research, hearing your input on what could be going on with that case, and then thankfully we did have some nuggets of information come out because there was a lawsuit going on around that case. I came to learn the the true facts that we could actually lean on in that case, however small and few there are, but how those varied so much from the popular stories that were being told for literally years at this point, that it really, even though I was trying to be very good about my research, as soon as I started the Brain Scratch series and as soon as I got into all that, it was really a challenge to weed through so much misinformation that went all the way up through major media sources. I'm not just talking about people writing blogs. I'm talking about your favorite newscaster on the 10 o'clock news that was just getting it wrong, just absolutely wrong. So that's what inspired me to do this. There are a lot of good thinkers out there. I know that you guys are out there. And that's something that I always appreciate about Brain Scratch. I'm just looking to start a conversation, but it's really to get your minds going, to get you doing some research, to get you thinking for yourselves. And then if my opinion's wrong on something, please bring it back and challenge me on it. Please drop it in the comments. And that way I'm able to take a look at your information and grow. And because of that, the Elisa story in particular turned into over 12 episodes, just covering all these different branches of possibilities, which wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for your feedback. So, truth delivery. Have you ever had something happen in your own life for which you have no logical explanation? When I think about that, I think about two occurrences in particular. I do believe I've talked about each of them on JohnnyVlogs in separate episodes. One of them was when I was very young. I believe that I saw my great-grandmother's ghost. I was at home. My parents were across the street. My aunt and uncle lived right across the street at one time. My parents were over at their house and they left me alone at home. And I saw something out of the corner of my vision. And I turned my head and I was literally looking at my great-grandmother that had just passed. And to this day, I still question it. I don't know if it was, I was pretty young at the time. I still wonder, is that some piece of imagination that I worked into my memory somehow? Like, I still struggle with that memory, but I remember it very specifically. I remember looking at her. I remember her walking down the hall, and then I even got up and went down the hall to follow her, and of course she wasn't there. The second thing that would fall into that category for me is really, I think, what most people would consider lost time. At one point, I was laying in my bed looking out the window outside. It was late afternoon. I was holding my head up with my hands. I closed my eyes, opened them again, and it was the next morning. And I think it's pretty impossible that I would have slept in that position throughout the whole night. I don't even remember falling asleep, which is what's weird about that one. I don't remember if that was around any particular occurrence. I did get hit by a car when I was really young, which might have something to, it might be around that time frame. So I don't know if I might have been on some type of medication or something, but those are definitely the two things that are not explainable for me that I still wonder about to this day. From Jake, hey John, what is your favorite documentary? Are there any that hit you a lot harder than you thought they would? Huge fan, by the way, been watching since the original Elisa Lam vids, and certainly without having to think about it too much at all, the documentary Dear Zachary, A Letter to a Son About His Father is the one that fills all that for me. I think it is my favorite documentary because it's so unexpected, because the events in it are so unexpected, because the director had such good footage and access to the people that were immediately involved in the case. It is a perfect example of an extremely well-handled documentary. But it even goes beyond that. There's certain scenes in it where the filmmaker gets somewhat creative with how he's showing you the information. And there's one segment in particular that I remember is like a nightmare. It literally feels like you are going through what these people are going through. Like, I almost started feeling like I was having a panic attack just from the way it was edited, and there's people yelling and there's a lot of quick cuts and everything's moving very fast. But it is brilliant. It is hands down brilliant, and I think it's my favorite documentary. It's a tough watch, but the events, you will never see them coming, and in the end, it is a beautiful tribute in so many different ways that it's, when it comes to that kind of film, it's definitely my favorite. back to the questions. We only got one more. Zachary Blake, has a YouTube comment ever changed your opinion on a subject or case? I kind of touched on that a little bit, but just to elaborate, certainly, it certainly has. It started with the Elisa case, with hearing other people's feedback, other people's theories, looking into those theories, doing follow-up episodes. Even other cases like Kendrick. And that's a bit of a tough one because you have some racial issues that could come into play there, and there was a bunch of people that some of us might consider them racist. There's just no way around it. They were very driven with their point of view about what was going on in that case. However, some of them, despite them having a bit of that overtone, had access to information that I was very desperate to get my hands on, including tons of police records, basically a whole investigation file that I later found out belonged to a reporter who just didn't know how to lock down his Google Drive. But yeah, certainly. I don't think that I would look into the comments as much or care about them as much as I do if it wasn't for that aspect. And as I said earlier in this video, I'm malleable. I am not proclaiming to have the answers to any of the videos that I shoot. What I do proclaim to do is I'm going to do some work to understand something, and then I'm going to bring that point of understanding to all of you. That doesn't mean that we're done. That doesn't mean that my job is done at that case, and if you guys don't understand what I'm talking about, then you're wrong. That is hardly the case. And I know that's a shift for a lot of people because we're used to this television one-way conversation mentality, and YouTube just isn't that. And quite honestly, I'm not interested in doing stuff like that. I am much more interested in learning and having my theories tested. If I can't support my theories, then maybe I shouldn't hold them with such high regard or high esteem. There have been many comments, and it's interesting because occasionally it'll be just one comment. I mean, it's one thing if you get several comments from different people and they're all saying the same thing. It's very easy to recognize, okay, there's a trend there, I've got to do something about that. But there's also another little skill set that I've found where sometimes one comment will hit me, and I have to look into that and say, wait a second, why is that one comment getting at me like this? That means that there's something about this that I'm really not comfortable with for myself, or that I don't fully understand for myself. So how do I rectify that? Do I look into it more? Is this person actually raising a good point? And in most cases, that's a yes when those comments hit me. There are other times where there's comments where, it's just blatant name calling, or I notice this trend occasionally where people will see that a topic is kind of close to a topic they want to talk about, and then they'll say, well, this is just like this, and then they'll dive into this whole soapbox thing about their topic. And that's frustrating a little bit because those soapbox topics are not always directly related to the points that I'm actually trying to discuss in the video. Actually, the worst case of that happened when I went on a radio show and was talking about the holistic doctor deaths, and then we took some open questions after that from the audience, and the audience really didn't talk about the doctor deaths a whole lot at all. They seemed to want to talk about healthcare and how they couldn't get healthcare for a loved one of theirs. And, for a radio show, it was easy enough to kind of switch gears and go for that. For a YouTube video, I think it's a little different because the comments hopefully will be in the same topic as what the video is. It doesn't always happen that way, but I have to say, for the large part, particularly for my audience, for all of you guys, we do a great job of staying on topic with the comment threads in that video. And if there are other topics you guys want to talk about, you can always drop those topics in the comments. I do keep track of all those suggestions. I have well over 200 brain scratch suggestions. I have about 100 searchlight suggestions. I now even have, I think I'm coming up on 25 case cracked suggestions. I even take suggestions for JohnnyVlogs. So just be sure if there's some topic you want to hear, you can always drop it in the comments. I keep track of all that. And if one topic keeps coming up, several people keep asking about the same topic, that's how I kind of prioritize and say, okay, I have to get that one out sooner. And then, of course, outside of that, there's also topics, if they just appeal to me, that they're timely, or there's something about them that I want to talk about, of course, I'll bump those up as well. So that's kind of how it works. Woo! See, I could do this all day. And that's a good thing, because I got another video to shoot right after this, doing more. Thank you guys so much for joining the Q&A. If you want to see the rest of the Q&A, I have no idea how long it's going to be, because I'm going to go through every question I can. Be sure to join my Patreon. There's a link for it in the description box below. And I will see you over there with many more answers. Hope the rest of you have a great day. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. Catch you next time on the Lord and Arts channel.